I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and the person who let me test drive his 2012 Nissan Leaf before I bought my first one, my friend Jukka Kukkonen. So glad to have you here. You're going to share with us, because you are the guru and the person probably in Minnesota that's done more dealership engagement and outreach than anybody in your years of advocacy. So take it away. Share your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thank you, Diana. I have a picture of my 2012 Nissan Leaf here, so you can remember the good old times. I'll share my screen here on my presentation here. So hopefully you can see it right now. So I said my name is Jukka Kukkonen. I'm a Chief EV Educator for Shift to Electric. And I'll be talking about this topic a little bit, and I'll start by explaining a little bit what I do. I'll hide some of the things here so I can actually see my own slides. That's always a challenge when you do the presentation with the same screen here. And my portion of this presentation is sponsored by Fresh Energy. So I'm an automotive engineer by training. I used to work for Ford Motor Company in the past as an area manager responsible of the dealership development. So I've worked quite a bit with dealers in Europe. So I know their model of operation, they're down to detail. And then I combined that with my EV stuff here, and that's how I had a good time talking with dealers here in the US too. Operations here in the US are not that different from Europe. They are similar, but there are some differences there in approach. In general, in my work with Shift to Electric, my job is to stay on top of what's happening in the EV market, so that I can help my customers to figure out what's their role in this new marketplace. I've done quite a bit of work with condos and apartment buildings and workplaces in figuring out the best charging infrastructure setups for those. Right now, condos and apartment buildings are a really big thing. There's a ton of interest in charging infrastructure in those areas. Workplace charging, not so much, as you can imagine. I started Minnesota EV Owners in 2012, and it has grown to become one of the biggest and most active regional EV owners groups in the US. We have about 2,000 members. So join us if you're interested in your personal route to driving electric, if you're already driving or if you're thinking about driving electric. And then I also work as an EV market expert at Fresh Energy. And I teach electric vehicle marketing and technologies course at the University of St. Thomas. We just have my courses in the fall, and we just going through it right now. It's really, really good to talk with the next generation of people who are looking into this and will be building the innovation in this area. And I've made it clear to all my students that you guys have no problem finding work in this area. There's ton of work coming up. So that's good. So here's a picture of my 2012 Nissan Leaf. That's when we got our first electric car in our family. And this is taken just after we got the car. As you can see, I was still young and handsome in that picture. So, and my daughter was 8 years old at that time, and now she's 16. And we got her actually a used 2013 Nissan Leaf that she's driving, and that cost us $7,500. So they are not too expensive. You can find really good used deals on used electric cars nowadays. And that one still has about 84% of the battery capacity left, even though it's 8 years old car. So I'm expecting that to last another 8 years probably in use. So again, they also last a long time. I wanted to start, before we go into dealers, I wanted to just kind of remind you why EVs make sense. Why are we talking about this? And it's the energy advantage that we have here. Here's a graph that shows vehicle fuel economy development from 1975 to 2015. And as you can see, it hasn't improved that much. Over the years, you would think that based on what you have heard from all the manufacturers of their marketing speak, the whole thing would have changed a lot. We would have had so much efficient, so much better cars. But truthfully, internal combustion engine has not improved too much over the last 40 years. It's pretty flat line, as you can see. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion about vehicle fuel economy standards, how those should be improving. And the graph here shows that Obama administration made a deal with the auto manufacturers, and that was improving the vehicle fuel economy standards by 5% every year, and that's the black line there. Then when Trump administration came in the power, they said, well, we're not going to ask them anything more, so that's the red line there. But then they got a lot of pushback for that, and they said, well, we'll ask a little bit more, so 1.5% per year improvement is what they were asking from the other manufacturers. And as you can see, that's not much. I mean, all of these truthfully are not changing the picture too much. The good news is that if we change to electric cars, and when we change to electric cars, this whole thing changes. So you can see that by comparison, the electric vehicle fuel economy is just in a totally different level. This is why I'm being an automotive engineer. This is why I work with electric cars, because they are just so much superior in their capabilities in almost every level. I mean, every level in that way. And their energy efficiency is clearly different. They are 4 times more efficient than traditional cars. So it's like, why would you even try to push the old technology anymore, because the new technology is so much better. So EVs consume 75% less energy than internal combustion engine vehicles. So anyone who starts driving electric, they drop 75% of their energy consumption overnight. So this is kind of the big picture thing that I hope that everyone remembers when you think about the electric cars and traditional technology, and why we are doing this, why this makes so much sense. But going to the to the dealers and how to work with dealers and how do they operate. First of all, dealers are independent companies, or they can be groups. There are more and more, we are starting to see dealers merging in the bigger groups. So some of the bigger dealership groups buy independent dealerships, and they might have 50, 100, 200, 400 dealerships in those groups. So they start to be a pretty big companies, and all of those companies are run a little differently. So if you walk from one dealership to another, the management might have quite a bit different way of running the organization. So there's not really totally cookie cutter approach to it. Basic approaches are the same, but just to be aware of that there's differences. And they are independent from the manufacturers. So Ford Motor Company does not own dealerships. These are independent dealerships that are running. So they work with independent dealerships there. And this is well, yeah, I'm not going to the history of the whole thing. So some of you probably know how it has come together in old times, but this is kind of interesting setup that we still have with this. So dealership makes a contract with OEM, so automotive manufacturer, and for that they get an exclusive sales territory, meaning that they are set the sales territory where they are a representative of that manufacturer in that territory there. And here's a picture of, for example, Toyota dealerships in Minnesota. And you can see that there's only one Toyota dealership in Mankato. There's only one Toyota dealership in Rochester. Only one in St. Cloud, only one in Duluth. In Twin Cities area, there's more, but they all have their specific sales territories. And another dealership cannot come there into that sales territory and start to show any new cars in that sales territory. Otherwise, the other dealership can sue them for that. So they kind of try to keep these limits, and that's sometimes a little challenge, especially when you're working here in metro area where there's many dealerships. You have to know which dealership you have to work with if you're doing an event in certain location. So you can't just have work with one dealership in all the different locations. You have to work with different dealerships. Okay, that's fair, but it makes sometimes the event coordination a little challenging. And the funny thing about this is that they don't publish what the sales territories are. So we don't know. What we need to do is, if we do an event in Twin Cities area, we have to call either to the manufacturer's local representative and check which dealership we should work with, or we check with the dealership and say, is this in your sales territory? So it can be a little bit challenging sometimes, but that's just, you should be aware of that you have to work with the dealership that is in that sales territory. OEMs, the manufacturers, set up a pretty strict rules on what the brand image is. How do you put together your dealership? What kind of a branding do you use there? They usually want to keep the like different manufacturers dealerships separate, so there has to be at least a wall between them. That has sometimes been challenged by dealerships nowadays. They say we can't put together a separate dealership, we have to combine them in some places, and there's always some arguments about that. But that's practically, they want to kind of separate them and make sure that Ford is Ford and GM is GM and Chevy is Chevy and so forth. So that's that. Inventory management is a big thing with dealers. In Europe, the dealerships work so that people like me walk in the dealership and I want to order a car or get a car. I can't test drive a demo car there and say, hey, this is a cool car, I like this one, but I would like it in red and this trim level and these options and so forth. And then I work with the dealership, we actually order it and it comes in 2 to 4 weeks and then I get it. That's not how the dealerships work in US. Here we have a ton of cars on a lot, and you go there and you expect to drive out of that lot that day or next day with your car. So practically dealers sell whatever is on their lot at that time. That's usually, there are cases where you order a car or you find something in another dealership and they move it. But majority of the sales happen so that they sell what's on their lot. And this is important when we talk about EVs, is that if there's no EVs on the lot, they are not going to be trying to sell them, because they just going to want to be selling whatever is on their lot, because that's how they can actually make sure that they get the sale. If they have just one EV on the lot, let's say there's a Chevy dealership and it has just one red Bolt. These salespeople are not going to be driving people towards that car, because if the customer happens to actually like blue and they don't like red, they can't sell that car to that customer. So they are worried that they'll be actually doing work in promoting that idea of you buying a Bolt, and then since I don't have the right color in my lot, you go to another dealer, you go online and just find it from other dealership and go and buy it there. So that's another challenge, is if we don't have proper inventory on cars, they're not going to be selling it. The other thing is that if they just have 1 or 2 cars, they're not going to be marketing it either. Because if they would be putting any marketing dollars to it and people would come to the dealership saying, hey, I'm interested in this Chevy Bolt. And you say, well, I have these 2 and I actually sold one this morning and I have only this red one left. It's wasted money. And these customers, if they again get excited about the Chevy Bolt, they go to some other dealership to get them because you don't have the stock. So that's why it's really challenging if we don't have enough inventory, and that is the biggest challenge right now, the dealerships, that they don't have enough inventory, and therefore it's hard for them to make business out of it. OEMs provide the marketing support, so they work on that level, and again, they usually provide marketing support for the vehicles that are mostly stocked there. And then they do different sales campaigns. Pricing in these cars can change every month, as we know. There's like all kinds of different campaigns, and it's sometimes hard to understand how these things work. I would say that's partly by design. They want to keep it a bit complicated so that you actually have to talk with the salespeople about it, and they can make sure that they can come up with some kind of magic there, that they find a really good deal for you. I think it's part of the process there. Why to talk with other dealers and the basic approach? Or actually, before we go there, what's my timing here? Yeah, I should continue with this one. So my presentation here actually is geared more to utility companies. So for those who are not from utility companies in this call, just be aware of this. So sorry, I built this mostly for utility companies. Hopefully this is helpful for others too. But if you're a utility company, cities are the same way. That's a little bit different dynamic there. But utility companies can definitely be a valuable support partner, because what these local auto dealers, and I'm talking more of outstate auto dealers, they are small entities in the area, and for them to make a change, which is quite big for them, they need all kinds of support. And if they know that local utility company is there to support them, that helps them immensely in this process. So that's one role that utility companies and other stakeholders play in this one. When you start to talk with other dealers, first thing is to explain why EVs are valuable for the utility and the community. I would say from my presentation, if you can somehow make this happen, this is the most valuable thing of all. If they understand what's the value of EV sales in locally here for the utility and for the community, you have achieved a lot. Of course, for the utility, we understand is that we are shifting people away from oil. So they are not spending money on oil anymore, but they are paying for their energy to the local utility company. So first of all, individuals save quite a bit of money because, again, as spoken before, the EVs use so much less energy that they are so much cheaper to drive. So they save money, and then all the money that they are spending is going to the local utility company instead of some big multinational oil company. So it helps utility company. That way, again, since most of the charging happens at nighttime, it means that utility companies don't have to do a lot of improvement into their systems, distribution and other, to provide this electricity. So it's great example of beneficial electrification for a utility company. And that helps them to get more revenue, which helps keep the rates lower in the future. So it helps the community, everyone in that way. More EVs there are, the whole community will get benefit from it. So if you can somehow explain this one to the other dealers, then they'll probably start to understand why it would make sense for them to actually work with EVs more. And this starts by utility companies, local utility companies, actually stating this one publicly, being very clear about these things, setting up a web page on your website there and explaining why EVs are good for everyone in your area. So as I said, if you can make this happen somehow, that would be awesome. You're really making good headway if you can get this done. Then explain the roles. So other dealers are experts in selling the cars. They know exactly how to sell the car, explain all the features, all the benefits of the car, but they don't know much that is what is happening in people's garages, and we kind of want to keep it that way. That's what the utility company can do. They know everything about people's home and the garages and energy there, so they can help with charging infrastructure and all of that. So if we can keep it very simple for the other dealers on the charging side, they'll love it. They don't necessarily want to know too much about charging infrastructure. They want to know the bare bone basics that they need to know, and rest of them talk with the utility company. They are happy to hand the customer off to the utility company. So that's a good, simple explanation of the roles there. And then, of course, ask how they would like to work with you. What are their thoughts about this? Of course, encourage EV sales, no surprise there. This all kind of builds on that. And then your basic story with them or approach with them is that you're there to help whenever they are ready. If they say, well, I can't do it right now or whatever, that's fine. Whenever you're ready, we're here to help. So that they at least know that you are always happy to work with them, whether they want to do it this month, next year. Explain how you can potentially help them with the charging infrastructure. We'll talk more about that a little later. Tell about your programs. What kind of programs do you have, or what kind of programs you're planning to put together that will help the customers, especially in charging infrastructure side. Then you can offer education and handouts. You can say, hey, if you want, we can do a little training for your team to kind of help them to get more familiar with this. And this is kind of and you can then provide some handouts of how your operations work, how you do your programs, and any general information that is useful for customers. What they usually like to have is something that simplifies their work, so that rather than having to remember, for example, all the charging infrastructure details, if they just have a handout, they can pull it out and say, hey, I got this from utility company, they explained this and this and this way, the charging infrastructure, and I know basics of this, but here's a contact information to the local utility, talk with them. And both are happy. The salesperson is happy, customer is happy because they got good information. And then tell them about potential promotional partnership opportunities. Whatever you want to put together with them, to say that again, you're happy to work with them, figure out the best ways to do it. And then best thing is, if you promise to buy an EV or two, this is one of the challenging points when you approach the dealers, is that you might have a hard time getting their attention because they are so focused on sales. So you start to talk with them something that is not on their plate right now. They have a million other things going on there. It might be sometimes hard. But if you say, hey, if you start to carry EVs, I'm actually interested in this model for our organization too. So that would be helpful. All right, then we go to EV market update next here. Any questions about this portion so far? Does anyone have any burning questions? Otherwise, you can just write the questions in the chat and we can talk later in the Q&A portion. If nothing huge right now, we'll continue. All right, so EV market update. So AAA did the study in 2018 where they learned that 20% of Americans are saying that they're likely to buy an EV for their next car. That's 50 million people. That's a lot of people. Consumer Reports and Union of Concerned Scientists did a similar study in in Minnesota here last year, and they said 6 in 10 prospective car buyers in Minnesota are interested in electric vehicles, including 30% who say that they would consider buying or leasing one within the next 2 years. So these are very encouraging learnings from these. At the same time, this doesn't mean that 20% of Americans are going to buy EV next year. No, or that 30% of Minnesotans are going to be buying EV next year. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it means that there's interest. And it means that we have to do quite a bit of work to educate people, to find them the right solutions, make sure that we have EVs available and all of that. So there's a lot of good work that we can do to actually help make this happen, but just so that we know that there's an interest. And we don't need to have 80% of the people thinking that they want to buy an EV. 20% is enough. That's definitely enough. Everybody doesn't have to be excited about EVs yet. If we have 10 to 20% people who are willing to move to electric cars, the rest of them will follow. That's how it works. So I'll give you an example of one thing that is sometimes I call this a myth of the high price of EVs, or the EVs always cost more. When I look at this, actually, usually when you take the tax credit into account, EVs are usually cheaper, the same price or cheaper than existing internal combustion engine, as long as they are comparable models. And here's a good example of this. I just went to Ford website and got a 2020 Fusion Titanium yesterday. Just look at it. Pricing is $34,450. Gets 21 miles per gallon in the city and 31 in the highway. You compare that to the Fusion plug-in hybrid, which actually is then you can plug it in, you can charge it, you can drive 26 miles with electric every day. Your first miles are always electric, so for many people that's most of their driving definitely will be done in electric. Look at that. It's $500 more expensive by purchase price. And then you compare what the MPG numbers are, and they're in a totally different level. It is so much cheaper to drive, so much nicer to drive. So why would anyone buy a traditional Fusion Titanium over the Fusion plug-in hybrid? There's really no reason, because you don't lose anything, you just gain by paying $500 more for it, and it's a huge gain that you can get with it. And then you take into account that actually for the plug-in hybrid model, you can get $4,600 tax credit. And all of a sudden you realize, hey, this car is actually $4,000 cheaper than the other one, and it's better. Why would you buy the other one? Well, because the dealerships have maybe 20 of those on a lot and one of the other one on a lot. Guess which one they are trying to sell to the customers? The ones that they have more. That is one of the big challenges we have right now with this. So talking about the US market developments in the last years, here we can see the growth of EV market share in the US. It was 2.1 in 2018. Then it actually dropped to 2019 to 2.0. So why is that? What is causing that? Well, if you look at the next graph there, you can see which manufacturers or models are the most sold. And you can see that Tesla is by far the most sold. But which sales dropped the most in 2019 were actually all the other manufacturers. And we have seen this happening even more this year. Why is that? Because they are just not providing the cars to the market. And if dealers don't have the cars, they can't sell it. They are never going to get good at selling EVs if they sell one a month or something like that. And that is our challenge, is the manufacturers haven't. So why are manufacturers not providing these cars to the other dealers? And one of the big reasons is that we haven't had any leadership in federal level in really asking for more of this. Whereas in China and in Europe, there has been a much bigger push towards making sure that manufacturers actually are offering these cars to the market. And since US hasn't had the same approach, manufacturers have put all the effort in the European market where and Chinese market, where there has been a big addition or request for more EVs, and when there was a tighter emission regulation that made sure that all the manufacturers had to provide it, and then when they provided it, people started to asking more. So there has been a big growth. So all the manufacturers have challenging time manufacturing enough of these cars, and of course they are going to put all of them in the European market because there's the demand. In US market, because there's no regulation for this that is asking for them to do it, they are thinking, well, we've sold the same kind of technology for the last 20 years, we'll just continue with that. So we are actually getting older technology, and we are kind of being left behind with the technology development here, and that is putting US in a competitive disadvantage in the future, because the better technology is used and developed in other parts of the world more. So that's our challenge with other manufacturers. Tesla, of course, is a totally different ballgame. They are just increasing their sales. They this year are going to be taking 70 to 80% of the market share in the US market of EV sales. Think about it, 70 to 80%. So other manufacturers have kind of given it to the Tesla, and Tesla is happy to take it, no problem. So that is the challenge that manufacturers and local dealers have, is that Tesla is going to eat their lunch if they don't do something about it. And it will happen soon. Tesla will come with the lower priced vehicles soon. And at that time, if the others are not used to doing it, if they are not good at EVs, they don't have the systems, Tesla will take care of the sales. So we have seen that a little bit this year. Already first 9 months in this year, overall, all car sales, not just electric cars, all car sales, of course, have been going down this year because of the pandemic. And all manufacturers have lost sales in the first 9 months compared to the last year's first 9 months, except one, and that's Tesla. Tesla increased their sales by 21%. So that tells that we are already seeing the shift that is happening, and others need to get their game together. Otherwise, they're going to be left behind. Here's an example from the Europe, how their market is growing this year because of the things that they have done there. You can see the yellow graphs of different months sales, and you can see in many months it's a double from last year. It's growing really, really fast there. And again, this is when they are starting to hit the tipping point. People are starting to learn that it's just, this is just better option. Yes, I should do this. And then the market starts to do a faster shift to electric. In Minnesota, if you want to look at your local sales numbers and the registration numbers, Minnesota Department of Transportation has really cool electric vehicle dashboard. So go check it out. It provides information about charging stations. We have over 1,000 public charging stations. So when someone asks, do we have enough public chargings? You can say, yep, we have a pretty good start. We have over 1,000 of them already, which is pretty good. We still need more in outstate, but excellent basic coverage right now already. And then vehicle-wise, we have almost, that was probably, I think, the September numbers. So we are over 15,000 already in sold EVs or registered EVs in Minnesota. More of them starting to be full electric, and I think that's what we will be seeing in the future. And here we can see again Tesla's dominance in this one, and they'll be growing their market share quite a bit. They have already sold over 1,000 units this year, and others, as I said, if you think about Tesla selling 70 to 80% of the market, they'll be growing their thing. So remember also, when you put your programs together, is that good portion of the buyers will be Tesla buyers. So then talking about the cars that are available in the market right now, you can go to EV Infolist, download the full list of all the cars that are in the market. I won't go through the details of all of them, but we have over 30 vehicles or models available in Minnesota, at least in theoretically. Again, what's the stocking levels of different vehicles? That's the challenging part. And I'll go into more details about this. I kind of pulled here just the kind of like the main ones that you most likely will see also in outstate dealers that could be available there. Audi e-tron, Audi QE are the other one is battery electric vehicle, the other one is plug-in hybrid. But as you can see, stocking levels 26 in Minnesota, Audi Q5, only 5 of them. Chevy Bolts, there's actually a good number of them right now, 86. So that's a decent number. So many Chevy dealers are starting to carry Bolts. That's a good sign. Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid, the same thing there. I'm pretty happy to see 41 units already in Minnesota dealers. At the same time, you can see that the other number is 584, tells how many Pacificas overall are here, and that's 584. So there's quite a bit more internal combustion engine ones as hybrid ones. The same is true with the Ford Fusion Energy here. As you can see, there's one plug-in hybrid Ford Fusion in Minnesota at the dealerships and 214 of the traditional ones. Good time to talk with the Ford dealership to see if that number could be changed. Kia Niro plug-in hybrid, 9 of those in Minnesota right now. Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrids, we have 91 of those, which is a really good number. in Minnesota. Truth is that probably 85 of those are at the White Bear Mitsubishi. That is leading Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid dealership in country in many months. So they are doing really good work with it. So check them out, check what they have done. Nissan Leaf, 17 of those in the market. Not a very good number when you think about all the Nissan dealerships in here. And then Tesla Model 3 Y, S, and X. These are not available, of course, in other dealerships. They are only Tesla stores, and there's 2 of those in Minnesota, 1 in Eden Prairie and 1 in Maple Grove. But they have plenty of stock all the time. I don't know what the stock numbers are, but they usually have a good number of stock, so they don't have same kind of limitation at their stores as the dealerships have availability challenges. And then Toyota Prius Prime, again, only 6 Primes in Minnesota and 342 Priuses here. So you can guess which ones the dealers are going to be selling more. So in the future, we are expecting to see much more crossovers, SUVs, and pickup trucks coming in the market. My list says about, over 70 at the end of 2023 in the US market. How many of those we will see in Minnesota will be decided. Again, it's how many also we ask to have here. And part of that is the Clean Cars Minnesota stuff that Anjali will be talking more about. A couple of, some upcoming models 2021 that are very interesting. Ford Mustang Mach-E is really their new Halo car, and Ford dealers are really excited about this. We should see, they are saying that they'll start the deliveries before the end of the year. I would be surprised if we will see any in Minnesota before that, but sometimes next spring we'll start to see more. So if you talk with the Ford dealers, that's a discussion you should have, is what they are thinking about it, how many are they expecting to get it, what's their thought in general about it. Ford Escape plug-in hybrid is also probably going to be available for us in springtime. Jeep Wrangler 4xe sometime next year. Hopefully we'll see some of those in Minnesota. I don't know, but we can hope. Nissan Ariya. So Nissan has a new bigger crossover Ariya full electric that is coming in the market next year. I'm expecting that to be available in Minnesota next year, later next year, because Nissan has been providing their models like Leaf very well to dealerships that want to sell them. Rivian R1T will be hopefully available next year in Minnesota too. Not that the dealerships will see what their distribution approach will be. That's not totally clear yet. Toyota RAV4 Prime is already available in the US, other parts of the US, except in Midwest and some of the other states. It's mostly in ZEV states right now, and that is a really hot car. That's the challenge, is that they don't again provide enough stock for the dealers of that one. That would sell as many as they would bring. I think the base price for that is $38,000, and it goes from 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds. Provides over 40 miles of electric range. So it's an excellent car. It would sell like hotcakes if we could get some. Volkswagen ID4, the first batch of that one is already sold out. So I'm expecting us to see some units before the end of the year, but more this springtime. Excellent car CUV there. Then 2022, we're expecting Chevrolet Bolt EUV, so the crossover full electric Chevy Bolt, so a little bigger one. Then GMC Hummer EV, Ford F-150 electric, and Tesla Cybertruck are coming in the market. So we are starting to see the pickup trucks coming in the market, and those of course will be very exciting, especially for Minnesota market. And then Ford just announced that they're going to have an e-Transit also in the market in 2022. These are just samples of the ones that I think that are most likely we'll see in Minnesota. But as I said, I'm expecting to see over 70 EVs available in the US before the end of 2023. So there are a ton of other models that are coming. These are kind of like just samples of that. So then talking about the charging infrastructure at dealers, how utilities can help. So all the dealers will have to put some kind of charging infrastructure in place when they start to sell electric cars. So usually when one dealership says, I would like to start selling electric cars, they talk with their manufacturer, and manufacturer says, here's the list that you need to do. Usually it means that they need to have 1 or 2 service technicians go through the training. This is normal for any model. They get any new model that has different technology, they go through the training. So it's not different from any other model. Sometimes dealerships say, well, I have to pay so much money for getting EVs. Yes, there's some of that, but truthfully, they do the same procedure for all the other models too. So just be aware of that when you have the discussion with them. With EVs, there might be a little more because it's a little bit more different technology, but again, the process is very similar. Then they have to get some special tools for it. And I've heard the biggest concern or biggest cost have been the lift for the battery. So they have to have a new lift that they put underneath the car when if they have to remove the battery and take that down. That's the biggest cost. Otherwise, it's like any other model. You need a different kind of special tools for working with it. So that's that. And then they usually need to put some charging infrastructure in. And this is where utility companies can help, is figure out what's the best way for you guys to help them in this. For level 2 charging stations, they usually need some in service. They definitely need some in a delivery area or wherever they store the cars so that they can keep them charged. And then also they could provide some for customer use. And DC fast charging, more and more these cars will have bigger batteries. So the battery size has grown, and therefore most of them actually start to have DC fast charging capabilities. And that's why it makes sense for dealerships to have DC fast charging. For example, for Chevy Bolt, Chevy required all the Chevy dealerships that started selling Chevy Bolt that they will install a little lower powered DC fast charge equipment in their service bay so that they can always charge the car, at least in a service, if not nowhere else. But more and more we're starting to see them actually requiring a bit bigger, faster charging equipment so that they can have those cars charged and moving whenever needed. And if they put it outside, then customers can use it too. So have a discussion with the dealership about this. Provide them technical help in figuring out how they can run the power best for whatever location it is, how they can manage the loads and all of that. And maybe the utility company can actually pay a portion of that. Maybe they can provide the transformer capacity increase if there's need for that. Or maybe they can provide a level 2 charging station or 2 as part of their programs. Depends on how utility companies are doing their programs, but this is a good opportunity to really work with the utility with the dealership and offer good help, tangible help there. Then you are, as a utility company, you're going to be building different kind of programs, and then how to work with dealerships to help them and provide value with these programs. So when you think about end user, the customer charging the cars, we know the majority of that happens at home. So one of the figures is 85% of the charging happens at home. This is kind of the key thing for you to remember and also to communicate to the dealership, because they have to explain this to customers when they talk with the customers about the topic, that you don't have to go and use public charging stations. Majority of the charging happens at home. So that's where utility companies should put their first effort, is make sure that they have programs to help the customers to figure out the home charging as easily as possible. And utility companies can be trusted information source on this one. You guys know the energy, you guys know what happens in people's houses. You can provide good information and support for customers about this. And this is exactly where the dealers don't want to do anything. If they can stay away from this, awesome. They love it. When you explain it to them, they're like, yes, please. If you can take care of that portion, that's great, because I just want to make sure that I provide good service for a customer when I sell the car. And for the charging infrastructure, if someone else takes care of that, that's great. They'd be happy to let you work on that one. So provide them simple and easy to explain programs. So if you are working with the dealership and provide them information, make sure that the programs that you are offering for the end user, the customer there, are something that are simple and easy to explain, and then potentially provide them a handout that helps them to explain it. You can also provide them electrician lists. If you have some recommended electricians that have done installation on EV charging infrastructure and know your programs, that would be very helpful, because when they talk with their customers and customers, well, I should do this charging infrastructure, how do I start with it? Well, then they could provide customer the sheet of information. They could provide potentially the electrician list, and then they could say, and talk with your utility company. They're happy to help. Here's their number. Your EV rate options, of course, you have you're developing those, providing those, and then also provide renewable energy options, because many people who buy EVs start to think then, all right, so how is my car then powered? Can I do something more? And then they start to think about, can I power my car with renewable energy? And if you have a good energy programs to support for it, provide information about that. And then if you can provide some kind of incentives, those work always. Those are great. So it's really, really good if you can do something like that, because new car sales, the margins are pretty slim, and especially the salespeople, they might sometimes, if you could provide like $200 incentive for selling an EV, that is really, really good motivator for the salespeople on that one. So you can make a deal with the dealerships that, okay, if you when you sell an EV, if you provide that customer all this information and make sure that they contact us to talk about the charging infrastructure, because you want to anyways talk to the customers, we'll provide $200 incentive for doing that. That is really valuable for the dealership. So consider that option. If that's possible, that would go a long way there. You can offer training and handouts. I already kind of explained what kind of things. I have done quite a bit of these trainings. I've done dozens of these trainings, and usually we have done it in a 30-minute training at dealerships' weekly sales meetings. And we usually cover following topics. We talk about the EV market, roughly where it's going, what kind of models are in Minnesota, just so that they have an idea, basic information. I spent quite a bit of time talking with them about advantages of EV models that they sell. And I don't so much talk with them about what's the advantage of it. They are selling Chevy Bolts. How are Chevy Bolts better than Nissan Leafs? No, that's not the discussion that I'm having with them. I'm having a discussion with them starting this way, that let's say that they are selling Chevy Bolts, and my question is, if a customer comes to you and says that, hey, I've been looking at different cars, I'm looking at the Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla, which seem to be pretty good cars, but I heard about this Chevy Bolt, and you guys are selling it. So could you explain me why Chevy Bolt would be better option than either of these cars? And that's the key piece. If the salespeople at this point can explain clearly why their Chevy Bolt is better than traditional internal combustion engines that competitors are offering, then they are starting to be pretty good EV salespeople. That's kind of a pro level, and that's what I usually try to make them start thinking, is that how do you do that? And I do a little bit of back and forth with them, asking them to throw me advantages, and they usually come up with 5 or 6 maybe, and I have a list of 100 of them, and then I say, well, and you can then use this and this and this and this too. So that's kind of a fun discussion with them. Helping them also in the training is how to make charging easy, so that they don't have to worry about it too much, and also how to work with utilities. These are tied together. So at this point, when we work with utility companies, usually I do these with utility companies, these trainings. We talk about the utility company programs, how they tie into it, how they can very easily close the deal with the customer, so that customer, the only question they have to ask from customers, do you have 120 outlet in your garage? And customer says, yes, great. Here's the car, here's the cord, just start driving. And then if you want anything more about charging infrastructure, utility company here is happy to help you. So give them a call. They would love that situation where they don't have to spend too much time on that, but they could just move it forward and still keep the customer happy in the whole process. And then the very important thing in these trainings is to answer all their questions. They usually have a ton of different questions about EVs that they have heard or that they are wondering, because it's a new technology to them too. And that has been really good to have a deeper discussions with them when they ask those questions about it. So again, providing clear and useful handouts for them is important. One handout and one program that we have developed to help them is mncharging.org. And this is a very simple program that is kind of trying to make sure that customers can find their utility resources no matter what's their utility company. Because as we know, utility companies are regionally based and people might go different places to buy the cars. So the challenge we have here is that we have almost 400 auto dealers in Minnesota. And they are car sales experts. And then we have 175 or something like that utility companies. And these auto dealers cannot know all the programs all the different utility companies have. And utility companies can't contact all the auto dealers to educate them about all these programs. So that's the challenge. So the basic idea here is that when customer comes to a dealership and they want to buy an electric car, and then the only thing that the salesperson has to ask from customers, so what's your utility company? And then they go to mncharging.org, they choose their utility company from that list, and then it directs them directly to that utility company's website. And this is designed so that it works really well with just a cell phone. And that way, that salesperson can actually show to that buyer that, okay, it looks like, oh, you're a Connexus Energy customer. Oh, okay, they seem to have a programs here about EV charging. You can see them there. And they seem to have a $500 incentive here too. So that's a pretty good deal. I don't know much about this, but hey, here's their contact information and just give them a call. So trying to make this process really easy so that always people at the auto dealership have an easy way to find the utility company resource, no matter what utility company the customer is actually related to. And also we have a renewable energy contact there too for that, but that's the basic idea with that. So that has been, the auto dealers have really liked this. Again, it simplifies their life quite a bit. Then promotional opportunities. Utility companies, of course, have a large customers or member base. Practically locally, utility companies know everyone. So that's very attractive to the other dealers, so that if they can work with utility company on this one, they can potentially reach out a good number of people. One way to do is to put some news items into existing communications. So utility companies, when they send out some kind of communication, they can say, hey, and our local auto dealer, this and that, is now having new electric car, this and that here. And we've been working with them, and they just put the charging infrastructure in. Just make a story of it. That's interesting, of course. You could go so far that you could have a monthly EV availability list. You could have in your website which auto dealers have which EVs available locally, promoting the local auto dealers with that. You could do co-branded campaigns with them. You could do a promotional campaign with the auto dealer of some of their models. That's great. And of course, events. Making sure having auto dealers bring their electric cars into some of the events that you're already organizing. Just have that as an additional benefit at the event. That's one good way to do it. Or if the auto dealers do some events, you can then go and be there present and help answer any charging related questions at the auto dealer events. So that's another way to look at it. And then Q&A. We have a few minutes here. We could probably have some quick questions about the portion that I've spoken so far. We'll have more Q&A time a little later, but if there's something specific to what I've said so far. Also wanted to tell you that we have mnevbuyer.com website where we kind of try to put the basic information on charging, economics, and stuff there. So check out that one, see if that's helpful for you and your efforts there. But do we have any questions right now before we move into Anjali?
Right, go ahead. And do you have, is that the last slide you have?
This is my last slide, yes.
Okay. So questions, and I'll say, I know that there was a question earlier that Drew asked in the chat. He asked, who is the best person to talk to at the dealership? Like the manager, the owner, somebody above kind of the regular sales guy who's trying to get a commission?
Very good question. So when you contact the dealerships, definitely you want to talk with either sales manager or general sales manager at that dealership. Might be owner too, depending what's the structure there. But talking anyone below that, normal salespeople, usually that doesn't move the needle too much. You have to be talking with the senior management of that. And especially in outstate, you might already have the connections. I remember I toured some dealerships in eastern side of Minnesota here, and the person from utility company that I toured with actually knew pretty much everybody that we were talking to. So that was already good. They already had the existing relationship. So that's
Minnesota small townism.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's good. That's good question, Drew. I was surprised looking at the vehicles that you had, that there are 86 Bolts. That was surprising to me. The number of Pacificas was also, because I had heard, not long ago, it was really hard to get those. So a really good number. I was surprised at the low number of Leafs. Only 17 seemed really small to me. It's just interesting.
Yeah, these numbers fluctuate a lot. I remember just a little while ago, as you said, they were not single Pacifica hybrid in Minnesota, not a single one, maybe one sometime, but now there's 41. I was like, wow, that's a good number. And then at the same time, we have had times when we have had 3, 4, 5 times more Leafs in Minnesota. So that keeps fluctuating quite a bit, and that is a little bit of challenge again. If the dealerships can't get consistently good amount of stock, it's hard for them to really plan their actions and how they want to do it.
And folks, if you have questions, either put it in the chat or raise your hand. But while, I've got a couple questions that, on the federal tax credit, I mean, obviously that has been a huge piece. You've talked about it, mentioned it a couple times. Tesla does not have a tax credit anymore. I know Chevy's had gone down in 2019 when I was looking. Are they done with their tax credit now too? Yeah,
they don't have a tax credit either. We will see what the new, so first of all, those tax credits are mentioned in our EV Infolist. So you can always find the right numbers there. That's a good resource in that way too. But the new administration coming in to White House and so forth, the Biden administration said that they would like to reestablish the tax credits so that they're available for all the manufacturers. And I think that would be a good thing, because then you're not penalizing the first pioneers with it. So that might happen, but they might put a cap on how much income cap for it. So if you're earning, I think it was as a family, if you're earning more than $250,000, then you would not be eligible for the tax credit, which again makes sense too.
Sure. And so, again, that would give Tesla a big boost again, because that, they obviously were the first ones out of the gate with, using up their tax credit. Are there any Ford or Nissan? Are they getting close at this point?
I'm guessing the Nissan is starting to get closer, but not. I don't think they are that close that they will lose it this year. Maybe next year they are starting to be there. I haven't looked at the latest numbers on that. But I think all of them kind of realized that yes, this would be good. Especially GM, if you think about it, they don't have any more available. I'm sure they would be happy to see it coming back too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So question here, has any dealership considered being solely focused on EVs? And maybe you could talk about GC Motors and the used vehicles market as well.
Yeah, we have one dealership, GS Motors, that is in Hopkins, and they have only used EVs available. So I would say check them out. They have between 20 to 30 units usually on their lot. And that's kind of a cool thing because you can always go there and check out different makes and models used and do a comparison and then figure out what works for you for best. This is actually a good approach for other dealers too, is if they are a little hesitant to make the investment or to carry on new models right now, they can always start by selling used ones. That's always available for them. They don't have to have any approval from OEM or any of the special equipment. They can start selling used electric cars to kind of try it out a little bit. So that's a one option that is available.
Great. Other questions that folks have? I actually have another question. You talked about Europe and how a bunch of car manufacturers are sending their vehicles to Europe because there is more demand there. Has that been the same with Tesla? Has Tesla focused on the US more, or are they also sending a lot to Europe?
They have actually spent probably more time right now in US and China. They are building a new factory in Europe, and they are kind of like waiting for that, and that should be ready sometime next year. So they will start to ramp up their European market production. Part of this challenge is also moving cars from one continent to another, is because we have tariffs, different kind of tariffs in place, unfortunately. And that makes it really hard for the other manufacturers even to produce the cars, because there's so many parts that are moved from continent to another as part of the production. So it has made their life a little complicated. But I'm guessing that's a part of the challenge that we see there too. We'll see.
Another question from Drew: How has the online market affected dealers? Vroom, Carvana. Can this help pressure them to carry EVs?
Those Rooms and Caravanas and others are definitely doing a lot in a used market now. They are offering the cars there, and they are offering EVs the same way. So it is something that, again, when you talk with the dealers, one thing that you explain them is that this market segment will be growing, and this will be growing fast. And if you're not gonna do anything about it, others will take care of it. That is fact. Yeah. There's no question about it. They kind of see the writing on the wall, but they are still a little hesitant to change any of their existing systems, how they are operating. But you can just tell them this will be moving, and it's better to start small and start going to that direction than wait and see when others start to eat your market share. So I'm just looking at, for example, Duluth. I think there was over 200 EVs, if I remember right, something like that. At least over 100 EVs that are right now in Duluth area. And not a single one of the Duluth dealers carries EVs, at least in the past they haven't. So all of those cars have been bought in Twin Cities or other places and brought there. And the local dealers are just missing out on an opportunity because they haven't been willing to do it.
Yeah, good comments. Well, thank you, Jukka. Stick around. We're going to bring up Anjali and have her talk about the Clean Cars Minnesota efforts. As we said in the email, both Drive Electric Minnesota and CERTS don't have a position on the policy of Clean Cars Minnesota, but it seemed important for everybody to be informed about what's happening, and because it certainly will change things potentially with electric vehicles. So we've invited Anjali to talk about it and share some information and insights that her team has been working on over there at Fresh Energy. And then After she presents, then we'll open up the question and answer for both her and Jukka again. So Anjali, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear more and understand better what this initiative is. She's frozen or muted, both. No, you're muted.
There we go. Okay.
On the Zoom, there you go. Perfect. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Just want to check. So you guys can see the right slide, the first slide.
We can. Absolutely.
Thank you guys. Thank you all so much for the time and space to talk about a policy that you know, is a little bit complicated, and as a result, it gets misrepresented often, both in media and by some folks who I think it's doing something that it's not actually doing. So I'm just going to spend the next 10-15 minutes laying the groundwork of what the policy does, what it's meant to accomplish, and then also take some time to go through some of those myths, as we call them, just misunderstandings associated with this policy, and clarify what it actually is supposed to do. And also, my name is Anjali Bains. I'm a senior policy associate at Fresh Energy. We are a clean energy nonprofit policy shop in downtown St. Paul. We've been around since the early 90s, working to advance clean energy, and this is one of many pieces of policy that we work on to advance that agenda. All right, so first off, Clean Cars Minnesota, it's said a lot, but what is it actually? It's this effort to adopt stricter emission standards here in Minnesota, primarily focusing on reducing greenhouse gases and other air pollution from light duty vehicles. So it's your cars, your pickup trucks, your SUVs, and it's came about now in fall 2019 when Governor Walz directed the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to perform rulemaking to adopt clean car standards. So Clean Cars Minnesota is really just describing that whole effort to adopt clean car standards by a rulemaking. Of course, that leads to the question of what exactly are clean car standards? And why can a state even adopt them? So clean car standards are a set of stricter than federal emission tailpipe standards. States can actually choose between following federal tailpipe emission standards or adopting clean car standards because of the Clean Air Act that was passed back in the 1970s. That piece of legislation ended up giving California special authority to set stricter than federal emission standards, and also gave states the chance to adopt those same standards if they choose. So although the language and kind of the origins of these standards is with California, it has expanded far beyond that in the last 50 years. We now see that 13 states and the District of Columbia have adopted some form of these standards, many doing so in the early 2000s or 2010s, and representing over 35% of the passenger vehicle market. So it's not just beholden to one state anymore. It's really a countrywide option, and it's an option the states can pursue if they choose to do so. Specifically, what are clean car standards? These are a set of rules that applies to automakers only, that requires them to both clean up what comes out of their tailpipe for all their vehicles, as well as provide more zero emission vehicle options to the states that adopt these standards. And in Minnesota, since we don't really have hydrogen fuel infrastructure, when I say ZEV or zero emission vehicle standard, I really mean EVs, both plug-ins and full battery hybrids. And the low emission vehicle standard, that LEV standard, is really looking to reduce the greenhouse gases and air pollutants from all tailpipes. And it primarily accomplishes this through improvements in fuel efficiency. So by helping engines run more efficiently, you can reduce the tailpipe emissions, and also instantly use less fuel for the consumer. So it ends up providing some real cost benefits, cost savings for those who are driving these vehicles. And it applies to both gasoline vehicles and electric vehicles. The zero emission vehicle standard is really focused on supporting the transition to EVs. And that just applies to, electric vehicles. And it is focus on having automakers basically accrue a certain number of credits. There's kind of a complex ZEV credit bank that I won't get into in this session, but through it, automakers have to deliver for sale a certain number of EVs that are tied to the overall vehicle sales they make in that state, passenger vehicle sales. As a result, it ends up leading to more electric vehicles being available in the states that adopt the clean car standards. Going back to low emission vehicle standard, I have a note here that that'll become important a little bit later on, that the LEV portion of the clean car standards has actually matched the federal tailpipe emission standards since 2012. It came about after the 2009 federal government bailout of automakers. As a result of the negotiations through there, basically the federal government decided to standardize the tailpipe emissions so that they matched the LEV standard of these clean car standards. So from 2012 to 2020, these have been the same. In the spring, the current administration did decide to formally roll back those standards. So, beyond 2020, there will now be a difference in the federal emissions, tailpipe emission standards and the clean car standards. But we did have about 8 years where they were the same. And finally, it's important to note that, clean car standards are actually written so that any state that adopts them, once you adopt it, you have to go through a formal rulemaking, but once you adopt it, there's actually 2 years from adoption to implementation. And this is really meant to help automakers and the industry prepare for that transition to a new set of standards. So it's important to note that, as we talk about Clean Cars Minnesota here, anything that gets decided in the next 6 months isn't going to go in effect until, earliest, it would be 2024. So I think that's a really important point to make. This is not something that would be an overnight change in the market in Minnesota. But there are reasons, there are reasons to adopt this relatively technical policy, and it really swirls around the kind of things that Jukka was mentioning. So EV availability is a really, really important barrier that states like Minnesota that are in the Midwest that aren't by any other states that have clean car standards, it's hard to find EVs. You've heard many anecdotes of people having to go out of state to find the EV they want, or just not having availability at dealer lots, like Jukka was mentioning. Adopting clean car standards has been shown to increase the number of EVs in the state because automakers are required to deliver those EVs to the state. It also just sends a signal to automakers that Minnesota is ready and there's a serious market here for EVs. If in an ideal world, manufacturers would be producing enough EVs and they'd be able to ship them to every state. That's not the case right now. We are in this transition period where manufacturers are trying to scramble to get up to the demand. And as a result, doing things like adopting clean car standards just makes sure that some of that EV production that's underway gets to the state of Minnesota. There's also real cost savings, as I mentioned, from both the LEV standard and the ZEV standard. Of course, Jukka's the expert and he's gone over some of the benefits of EVs in general, but there's some real cost savings from the LEV standard, again, clean vehicles, and it's focused really on improving fuel efficiency. Fuel costs for these cars are much lower than they are for cars that don't match the LEV standards. So for instance, there's actually a report that a consultancy did for Clean Cars Minnesota, and it found that under clean car standards by 2025, the average car owner, so average gasoline car owner, would be saving over $800 over the life of the vehicle over a non-LEV compliant 5, would be saving almost $2,000 over the life of the vehicle. And that's largely from those fuel efficiency benefits and the cost savings that come as a result. So there are real consumer benefits to adopting clean car standards. And of course, a large part of the reasons why these standards even exist is because they provide benefits for the climate. They reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They reduce what's called criteria air pollutants, which includes your soot, your NOx, your I can't remember the other ones, but basically improving air quality. Those are really big goals of a policy like this. And the same consultancy that found the cost savings over the life of the vehicle from a clean car standards also found that by adopting clean car standards, Minnesota could reduce greenhouse gas emissions annually by 1 million metric tons by 2030 under kind of the compliance scenario for clean cars. But of course, if we view clean cars as kind of the starting point, and if we have more EVs on the road, beyond what clean cars calls for, then the greenhouse gas saving reductions would be much larger. Because there are so many utilities here, I did want to also include a point that's tied to clean cars to the extent that it's focused on bringing more EVs to the state. But the fact that more EVs can lead to real ratepayer savings as well. There was a report in 2018 by MJ Bradley that showed that under a high electric vehicle adoption scenario, by 2050, ratepayers could save over $10 billion on their utility bills just by promoting the use of EVs and having it be managed charged. So charging off-peak at the lowest cost, which is a real benefit for both ratepayers and for utilities and co-ops and munis to consider. And while this was a projection, a forecast of what could happen in Minnesota, we actually have seen this happen in real life in California. So in PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison, the two utility territories that have the most EVs in the US, they actually did a study that came out this summer that showed that EVs in those territories contributed $800 million in grid benefits and kind of grid revenues over their costs to PG&E and SC&E. And a portion of that will go back to ratepayers because of the way those two utilities are structured. And that's just proof that these expectations, the analyses are actually happening in real time, and something to take note of as we continue this EV transition. Great, so I've talked a little bit about what clean cars is, what it can accomplish. As I mentioned at the outset, it's a relatively complicated policy, and as a result, it gets misrepresented quite a bit. So I wanted to go through some common points you might hear, particularly from dealerships around what clean cars does or does not do. So quick fact checks, clean cars, Minnesota clean car standards only applies to light duty vehicles. It doesn't affect anything bigger than, a Ford 150, F-150. It doesn't affect trucks. It doesn't affect farming equipment. It doesn't affect anything off-road. It doesn't affect medium or heavy duty vehicles. It's really just focused on those passenger vehicles. It also only applies to new vehicle sales. It won't affect all passenger cars and trucks in use currently. It doesn't require anyone to change the cars they're buying and purchasing and owning. It definitely doesn't make everyone buy an EV. Under Clean Cars Minnesota, as I mentioned, there's a ZEV credit structure that will require automakers to deliver more vehicles for sale to Minnesota. But even under the most stringent form, so by 2025, where this rule kind of increases in stringency up until 2025, less than 8% of new vehicle sales would be EVs. So again, it's not this earth-shattering, it's an important policy, but it's not this wholesale transformation of the market overnight. It is really trying to build up the change relatively slowly so the market can respond. It's also, as I mentioned, it's a state choice. It's Minnesota choosing to adopt clean car standards. And by doing so, it's not giving any authority to another state. By adopting clean car standards, we are not saying, hey, California, now you can set our own emission standards. The way it actually works, because it's a rulemaking, you're adopting a specific set of language called the Advanced Clean Cars 1 program that's already been drafted that applies to years 2016 to 2025. And And the way, the way the rulemaking would work is that you take that language and you basically plop it down and have it be codified in Minnesota. What it doesn't do is allow then California to make changes and to have those changes apply automatically to Minnesota. If California makes any changes, for 2025 and beyond, Minnesota has to go through another proactive rulemaking in order to adopt those changes. If Minnesota decide not to do that rulemaking, essentially what would happen is you get a 2025 and the rules would stay as they are. It would just kind of stay consistent until Minnesota decide to make a change. And I think that's a really important point that I think it's brought up a lot in opposition to these clean cars rules. And it's just making a point that we don't give up any sort of authority in Minnesota to California by adopting these clean car standards. Other myths I'll just kind of tick through here is that clean car standards are unpopular. In reality, the MPCA had over 2,400 public comments this last winter when they opened up an informal public comment period, and most of them are pretty supportive for many of the reasons I already talked about. A lot of people wanted to see action on climate change. A lot of people wanted to see improvements in air quality, and a lot of people just wanted more EVs and consumer choices around what vehicle they could buy in Minnesota. Kind of going off that, the idea that no one wants an EV in Minnesota is also not true. Consumer Reports actually did a survey in 2019 that showed that 66% of those surveyed wanted automakers to provide more EV options, and 30% of them were considering buying an EV in the next 2 years. It's also not a policy nor a technology that only metro or urban dwellers want. Residents across Minnesota want cleaner vehicles, better fuel efficiency, and more electric vehicles. And there's been a series of letters to the editors posted around Minnesota that have been to that effect. I'm happy to share those after this meeting if anyone's interested. And in it, they really make the point that actually those who live outside of more urban city centers, because they tend to drive more, those who tend to drive more end up benefiting more from a program that promotes fuel efficiency and EVs, because in both cases, you're reducing your fuel costs. And if you drive more, you end up saving more. Finally, another kind of really strong through line we see in some folks who are opposed to Clean Cars Minnesota is the idea that it's non-transparent and it should be happening in the legislature. The rulemaking actually has a really robust public comment period. MPCA actually already did an informal public comment period because they wanted to be extra certain that there is interest and support from Minnesotans. When the rulemaking starts, hopefully before the end of 2020, there will be another robust public comment period, which includes the ability to submit written comments, the ability to speak orally at a public hearing, and that whole process is really meant to get as many voices in the door as possible. So it's something that will be continued to be elevated and amplified by MPCA in order to get as much public engagement as possible. It's also important to realize that MPCA as an agency has the authority explicitly to adopt these sort of maximum emission standards because there is a statute passed by a legislature. So it's legislatively given authority to do this sort of rulemaking. So it's really just our system working as intended, with checks and balances, and the legislature has given the authority to MPCA to do this rulemaking. And finally, Minnesota is not alone in doing a rulemaking. Different states have done it differently. Some have done it through the legislature, some have done it through the rulemaking through an agency. It's just another tool in the toolbox of making good policy that ends up protecting and supporting Minnesotans. And the last piece I'll mention that Jukka's kind of alluded to, especially with the transition to EVs, is clean cars is one piece of the EV puzzle. It's not meant to be a solution or silver bullet. We're really focused on clean cars as being the tool to get more EVs to Minnesota, but we have to do a lot more to then support the transition to EVs, both on the consumer side and the dealership side. So, like last regular legislative session, there was a bill to support dealers with essentially grants that would help them pay for EV certification, help them install chargers. And that's something that was led by Minnesota Auto Dealers Association, and that's something that Fresh Energy actually supported. We want to see those kind of policies in place as well to help dealers be prepared for the transition. In addition to really good work that Jukka is doing in education, there's actual financial needs to support that transition as well. Alongside, as utilities and munis, making sure that there's even more programs designed to support EVs for the customer will be important. Trying to get some EV rebates passed to the legislature. It's probably not going to happen this year because of the budget deficit, but eventually we do want to see some more support for the overall transition happening in Minnesota as well. So with that, I will end. Thank you so much for the time, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Anjali. I don't see any questions per se. I see a comment, and Todd, you're welcome to come off of mute if you want to bring up your comment. And if there's a question that you have with regards to the public comments and public process. We are really just trying to provide some information to share with folks, and certainly not everyone agrees, and that's okay. So if folks have thoughts that they want to share, feel free, and if there's some questions, to put that forward.
I actually can respond to that to a process.
Sure.
So there's a lot you can go through with a clean cars, and I didn't get into the specifics of rulemaking, but the rulemaking, actually, the MPCA isn't making the decision. It's given to an administrative law judge to make a decision. So MPCA is providing its evidence, the public is providing its evidence, but in the end, it's up to the judge to make its call. So the judge will be taking in all the input, including public comments, in making the decision where or not Clean Cars Minnesota benefits Minnesotans more than it costs them. So it's not up to the MPCA in the end, it's actually up to the administrative law judge to make that decision.
But that's still not the legislative process. That's not the process of elected officials saying this is good for the state. I'm all for EVs being able to move into the marketplace, not through sort of the back door. I want the product to be good. I want the means by which we get them out on the road to be a good process. I feel like this is sort of an underhanded sort of way to achieve that. And I have some issue with it, and I would not be supportive of it.
Yeah, I mean, some legislators don't agree with it. Some legislators do agree with it. It's not a 100% either way. I think that's also important. This is just one of the tools of policymaking in Minnesota. So, respectfully disagree, but understand that people have different perspectives on it.
I would like to add here that I think legislators can exactly the same way ignore general public's opinions about things, and they have shown that they do that. So I don't think it makes a huge difference in that way.
It does, because you can elect whom you want to represent you. They can be unelected if they're not doing the will of the public. When you have administrators of an agency who are unelected and unaccountable making the rules, I just think it's the wrong way to go about it.
And certainly, obviously, folks can disagree. I mean, that is what's happening right now. There will, as Anjali said, that the PCA doesn't ultimately make the final decision. A judge does, and there's certainly. Is there a public comment period once the judge has this in front of him, the administrative law judge?
Yeah, I can actually, if you don't mind, I will share. There's a whole, and I'll include this extra information in the slides.
Sure.
I shared to the group here. So this is the rulemaking process. Hopefully you guys can see that. So this is really, if you want to break down what's happening at the in the rulemaking process. So, the draft rule hasn't been published yet, which would then kick off the formal rulemaking process. But assuming that happens for the end of 2020, we can expect about 60 days of public input early in the year. And that would run, include things like submitting comment periods online. There's a portal you can do it. It would include going to public hearings, probably virtual, where the administrative law judge will be presiding, and you can submit and present oral testimony. So that whole process is expected to, run in early 2020. And after that, that's really when the ALJ, the administrative law judge, would then take all that input, review it, and issue a report that either recommends adoption or recommends modifications or recommends it doesn't happen. And after that point is when the rule is finalized. So there is a pretty chunky public comment period that is expected to come up pretty soon here, hopefully.
And the public hearing with the administrative law judge, from way back in my way back time machine and work on some kind of rules that included administrative law judges, I've seen where they've done multiple hearings in different parts of the state. Do you expect that that will be the same situation here, just one in St. Paul, or will there be, you know, kind of more meetings across the state where people can provide input?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we don't expect anything to be in person, although we have, you know,
right.
haven't heard of a rulemaking. You know, I haven't found out what's been happening in the pandemic for the rulemaking. But you know, in normal circumstances, I think what had happened is that the ALJ would be physically in St. Paul, but they would have like ability to present virtually from other cities. So while I can't assume what's going to happen in this round, I would assume that's actually going to be easier to participate, because if it's almost all virtual, then it doesn't hopefully won't matter where you are in state.
Yeah, and I know that we did an event with the PCA in early January this past year, before the pandemic, but we did it, and we had the MPCA has regional offices with virtual teleconferencing abilities and such, and so I don't know if it would be that, or people can Zoom in, or however. I mean, obviously we're all getting used to the Zooming, and so there will be, in addition to public comments that happen early in the process, there will be this opportunity, and then this rebuttal period, and then they'll issue the rule. Is there any legislative review of any kind of the rule?
Legislative review of the rule. Well, I mean, so it will happen during, well, I mean, again, the timeline has shifted so much, which is why I'm not getting too much on the time right now. For folks on phone, you know, we thought this would be over by summer of last year. It is clearly hasn't been before, you know, November of 2020. So there will be a chance for legislators to weigh in as a general public on the process. They've already held some hearings about Clean Cars Minnesota, actually last legislative session. So you know, they had the commissioner out there to ask questions. So they've you know, both sides have made their points known. And again, the statute comes from legislative authority. So there's really that original oversight. And, you know, some folks might say, well, that statute was 1967, but that was a period when all these agencies got stood up to do environmental actions. And that is when the EPA came around. That is when environmental regulations came around. So we still do rely on that, because that's just how civic structures and policy work in the US.
And I would like to comment on rather than just how the process works and what's who does what and when, just the merits of the program itself. If you think about it, the left side of it practically just make sure that you remember I showed you in a previous slide there about the different emission standards. It would move it back to the 5% situation that was originally in place before the present administration changed that. So it wouldn't really change much in that way. It would just kind of keep the original thing actually, and there are many manufacturers who have supported that approach. So that's that. If that would have changed, it wouldn't do anything. So it's not changing a ton of anything in that way. And from EV side, it really gives 2 years for the manufacturers to respond. And after that, it's asking them to make sure that the sales in our state would be a couple of percentage points up to 8% until 2025. If they can't make that happen, they are going to be struggling with this business anyways. So it's kind of like a stopgap measure in many ways there. It's not asking much of them. And I actually find it very sad that some of the entities that are working in this business are fighting it, because it's hurting them. If you think about the dealerships, if they don't get the stock of EVs, they can't compete in the future. And the only thing that this would assure is that they actually can get EVs here in Minnesota, so they can actually start the transition and they can compete in the future. So from my standpoint, when I look at from technical standpoint, it's this is something that definitely should be in place because it helps everyone.
Well, and I think, Jukka, thank you, because you've presented on many meetings for both PAVE and CCA, and talking about the market. I mean, in the market, I mean, it's clear with all the so many manufacturers that have announced electric vehicle sales, et cetera, you know, they're ramping up. And yeah, I think what we're seeing is that, you know, those vehicles, understandably, go to states where there's more demand. I know that a lot of people, I mean, I would guess that the Ford F-150 electric version would do pretty well in Minnesota. So hoping that when that comes out, that there are a number of those vehicles that come here, because you know, as I talk to utilities and cities across the state, that's a game changer. It's just a game changer in Minnesota, both for fleets and for individuals. You know, and so you know, again, you know, we're not promoting any particular side of this, but we are interested in helping provide the tools and resources to cities and utilities to, you know, for their EV journey. And one of that is the availability of vehicles. And I know that, especially in Greater Minnesota, it's limited. And the models that are coming out over the next couple of years are going to be a game changer. And I hope that we see some of those here in Minnesota, because I know that it'll make a big difference. Other questions that folks might have? Comments, questions? We've got, you know, Jukka, you know, literally the statewide EV guru expert on the call. So take advantage if you can. We still have a few minutes, so time for a question and answer.
One thing that came into my mind that I forgot to mention that probably would be useful is when you talk with the auto dealers, just understand their sales cycles, so that they usually, and many of you are aware of this, that they're usually looking at the weekly sales, monthly sales, and especially quarterly sales. And that means that at the end of the month, they are really busy. So if you try to go to them at 28th of month and say, hey, we're going to talk about these EV programs, they're like, well, let's talk some other day. So they really the best times to talk with them is early in the week when it's quieter at the dealership, and not at the end of the month, and usually also not the couple of days after the month has ended, because they are still going through the whole process there. So early time of the month, middle of the month, and early in the week are probably the best times to engage with them, because then they might have a little bit more time to think about something else than closing the sales for this month.
Right. If you're looking for a deal, though, you know, you might want to go the last week of the month. So, question, you know, Bill Black from MMUA, thank you for joining us. Is EV maintenance an issue? I've heard it's hard to find in Greater Minnesota, which I think goes to the whole point of the dealerships not having them, and then also then not servicing them. So maybe Jukka, you can address that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the deal, is that if they haven't even started selling them, they haven't trained their service folks for it and so forth. So it kind of goes together. And that's again why I would recommend all the utilities to kind of support their work in this and say, hey, this is important. We would like to see you guys start to go this way. And many of the utility companies are, for example, providing a lot of public charging infrastructure and stuff like that helps sales in that way, that you can say that, hey, you don't have to worry about it. You can go and drive around, even though you do most of the charging at home, then you can then use the public charging when you need it. At the same time, maintenance is one thing that is good to be addressed and saying, and it's good more and more dealerships we have, then people know that they have the maintenance available too at those.
I really liked the point that you made about the opportunities for partnership, where, you know, make sure that the dealerships in your area know about electric vehicle programming that you have, offering your help if they're trying to put in infrastructure, so you can really, you know, help them with that, you know, getting what they need to, put charging infrastructure in as they start to, because even the ones that we haven't seen adopt electric vehicles, they, I think going forward, more and more of them will. There's continuing to be, I think, more and more of a demand for that, for electric vehicles. If you're looking for your, fleet to add some vehicles to work with them, but you can provide some education. And again, we'll include this in the follow-up, but Drive Electric Minnesota, we have some education pieces that you can use, to come up with your own to help share with folks about kind of this, the main, myths about electric vehicles, about range, about, where charging happens, which is mostly at home overnight, about cold and snow and what that impact is, kind of a whole bunch of things. And as, thankfully Jukka showed, I think some people still have in their minds that, electric vehicles are little tiny clown cars, and that's obviously not the case. And we're seeing more and more and bigger batteries and vehicles coming down in the market. And so, really, we have some great materials, charging guidance, all kinds of things. Shift to Electric has a bunch of great materials. There's a lot of resources out there. And again, our job is to help remove barriers and help you all with your EV journey. So however we can do that, that's what we're here to do. Really grateful to have Jukka and Anjali here today. This is technically our last PAVE meeting for the Powering Ahead with Vehicle Electrification of Municipal Utilities. We'll do a final survey to you all, and if there's an interest in any kind of other meeting, perhaps after the first of the year, to clean up or question and answer, maybe a trivia day just for funsies about what you learned, and if there's a way for us to help get you connected to resources, etc. Happy to do that. We look forward to working with you all to help educate your community about electric vehicles and what are the opportunities and where they can find them, etc. Just a reminder, Drive Electric Minnesota has been working with Plug in America on this kind of Minnesotans Going Electric webinar series. There's 6 webinars over the first week of December, and we'll just quickly scroll through. There's a number of them. This role of cities and counties in transportation electrification. I actually will be presenting at that one, talking a bit about you all and some of the work that's happened. You can go to the next one. There's a 101. So for those cities especially, or if there's still some utility folks out there that feel like they or somebody in their staff needs some work in their community, and certainly promote it to your community. If they want to learn more about 101 on electric vehicles, for Minnesota, people can learn kind of the basics. There are a couple other ones as well. I'm not highlighting all of them, but just a handful of them. There's a virtual test drive opportunity. So, get to kind of come on and hear that, talk to some electric vehicle owners and drivers. I'm excited to see how that is going to work as an EV driver myself. And a really great one, I'm really focused on kind of expanding charging for Minnesota fleets, workplaces, multi-unit dwellings, public locations. So really kind of covering a bunch of kind of that charging, expanding. And there's enough charging in Minnesota for most folks to get around if they, drive a normal amount under 100 miles a day. But it's expanding every day, and it's important to kind of learn about, how that's happening, where that's happening. And before I say thank you, I probably should have put in a slide too, just a reminder that level 2 charging RFP is out from Volkswagen funds through the MPCA. We'll send a follow-up on that too. I believe we sent that out to folks, but that's why we did the Charging Up series in the summer to prepare you for that. Level 2 charging applications are due, I think, in February, I want to say 8th or 18th. And so we have more information about that, but they are, the RFP is out. So you can go ahead and apply for level 2 charging. And the cool thing is that they're encouraging, and you get more points if you're including a connection to solar as part of that. So sort of a win-win, electric vehicle charged by solar. So that is an awesome thing as well. Let's see if there's any other questions or comments. Am I forgetting anything, anybody? I'm not sure I am. Well, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike just asked about the electric snowmobiles or other small vehicles, and I'm just sharing here the Polaris, which again is Minnesota company, makes great ATVs that are called Ranger EVs. I would say check those out. My brother has a farm in Finland, and he has used one for 3 years, and he's never doing anything else. It's excellent for farm use. Every day they use it there. And I spoke with the Ranger Polaris representative in a local dealer representative in Duluth at one event, and he had brought the Ranger EV there, and he's like, other guys in our dealership, they really didn't think that this is a good idea, but I was kind of interested in it. I started using it, and I actually learned that it's really, really good for many of the users. So if you are using the ATV mostly for work, the Ranger EV is actually a better option. So check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, and on that note, thank you again, Anjali. Thank you for being here. And Jukka, as always, good. Which reminds me, I need to talk to you about another meeting in January, so I'll email you. Love tapping you for your expertise. Thanks, everyone. This was really great. I'm so happy you could all be here. Safe, happy holidays to you, and we'll be in touch.